Wow, thank you so much for you guys' response on the last video. I really appreciate it. Of course, everything that I'm gonna be doing on this page is for musicians, producers, engineers, anyone that needs and seeking clarity in either the music business or how to mix or how to make records better and more strategically. This is what these videos are for. So I appreciate it. I'm gonna dive into a mass that I actually had the chance on working on. So this isn't a stem breakdown, but this is actually a song I got to work on with a artist named uh with a Latin artist named Atomic Otro and a feature named Shytt. And basically, I just want to show everyone how now modern day hybrid mastering goes. So it's gonna be some cool stuff here. I'm gonna show you the basics. Mastering should be very simple. It's all about just making things sounding balanced and adding a little bit of extra flavor, so then when the record hits market, it's gonna hit. So, when it comes to mastering, for myself, I keep everything still more on the creative side. I've never been super duper technical when it comes to audio. The most important thing to me is about feel. If you can't nail the feel, you can't nail the emotion behind something, then there's no point to the record because ultimately, this is what the people and the listeners want. They don't care about how unique your snare sound is or how tight your mix is, to be honest. What they really care about is how does this record make me feel? Then the next thing I think about is what do other commercial records sound like? If you do your homework and if you're studying other songs and other mixes and you're paying attention to also what is optimized for all the streaming platforms, hint Spotify and YouTube are still the most popular streaming platforms. If you are studying those things and paying attention to what's going on sonically, then you should be able to match your masters to those things. Sonics, just like fashion, moves in trends. And if you are not privy to what's going on with the times, then I'm sorry, you can't have a career as an audio engineer. Well, that's a bit of an extreme, but you know what I mean. Let me first off explain my mastering template. So when I get a master from a client, I will have the reference track up here. So let's make this active. And you can see this is actually routed through output 3 and 4. So what I'm mastering, actually what goes on is I have some outboard gear that I use and I run all my masters through that. Now, because of how OBS is set up, I can't fully show you what that interaction is like until I get a better setup. But picture this. I have an audio interface, my Helo links. I run the audio out into my Better Maker limiter, and then the Better Maker sends that audio back into the Helo links, and the links re-records that into Pro Tools. That's why I actually have outputs 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 in heavy use for this session. Now, for the sake of the example, I'm just gonna do everything simple and then go and show you how I did everything on Better Maker after the fact. My reference, I'm always gonna have it going to a different output. That way, when I'm listening back, I'm not having it processed by my plugins. Now, a lot of times I'll ask clients for the vocals and the instrumental separate in a master. That wasn't the case. Sometimes, if I'm having big issues and I don't have options to those, then I'll actually duplicate this master track into different tracks and then run things in parallel. Then I have what you over here. So for now, we will hide those two guys. And what I have over here is then just I copy paste it and drop down. And this is the file that I mastered. And then I run that through and that goes into my print bus over here that I record that audio into it. And then we can call it a day. So a lot of times you're going to get a master track that typically has limiting on it. I found that it's a bit of a luxury if you can be the engineer and ask another engineer to get a pre-master. A lot of artists are missing their files or engineers are hard to get a hold of and everything. So this is just a bit of a workaround. But when I see that, I know, cool. What I'm going to do is actually probably add some dynamics so I can make up for that with my own limiting too. And in order to do that, I'm actually going to have to lower the actual file by -7 dB, just so I'm not hitting my plugins too hard. Let's go ahead and give a listen to the record.
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de cabecear, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal. Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de cabecear, así que chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal. La te tapé como una alcancía.
All right, so we got a super fun Latin type record. If you notice too, I copy pasted my reference back up into here so I can come back between those two. But the first thing I hear is that this track, every component of it is really, really compressed, especially the vocals, and then the vocals are compressed into the body of the track. Now, there's a couple great techniques to be able to kind of restore the dynamics behind a highly compressed record. First and foremost is EQ. And this is actually amazing because it lends itself into the age-old common question, which do I use first, EQ or compression? Now, in truth, it's going to make people mad, but I always give people the Mr. Miyagi type answers. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you understand how they interact with one another. When I compress something, obviously we know we limit the dynamic range. And then when I EQ something, I actually can make something sound more dynamic because I'm pushing out particular frequencies. So when you put the logic together, you can see that they actually work in opposition with one another. If I'm going to take a compressor and put it on a vocal, now all the frequencies, not just the volume, but also all the frequencies and textures of a vocal will start to be brought out. That's why I'm sure you've had in the past when you put a compressor on one of your instruments, all of a sudden it feels like the instrument got muddier. What happened is that by smushing down the dynamic range, you actually brought out some of the mid-range and other frequencies within it. Then the opposite is true also when it comes to EQ. So if I compress a signal and then I add EQ after, whatever I compress, those signals, I'm going to bring those things back out with my EQ. In the most simple summary, EQ and compression, depending what order you use them in, they just undo the work that you did a little bit of the other. So that's why a lot of engineers tend to salt and pepper their EQ and their compression, where I add a little bit of EQ here, then add a little bit of compression, and then I make up for what I lost by adding a little more EQ back into it. And you kind of alternate back and forth between the two as you start to sculpt and massage the feeling of the sound. Now back to this record, if I'm going to pull out some more dynamic range, I'm going to lean on two tools, EQ, and what I did is I boosted the main frequencies. The vocals will usually sit up here in the high end. If I clear some space down in the lowest lows, it's going to make the kick start to come a little bit more alive. And if I also pull out of some of that mud in the 500 hertz area, then I'm going to restore some of the dynamics. So let's go ahead and give a listen to the chorus right here, first without the EQ.
Chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que chúpalo, sabe que es...
Alright, and now let's add in the linear phase EQ.
Chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escaparse, así que chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, la teta...
So it's very, very, very slight. But I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here when it comes to the master. I just want these things to be tuned. But if I play it back to you one more time, you'll notice the high end of the snare starts to come out a little bit more. The vocal is obviously a lot more forward, and there's a little bit more definition to the kick. Here, let me play it back to you one more time, and make sure you're listening, and make sure you focus listening to the kick, the snare, and the vocal.
Chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escaparse, así que chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, la teta peco.
Here's it off.
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escaparse, así que...
And here's it back on again.
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escaparse, así que chúpalo, sabe que es...
Alright, sounding good. A lot better, honestly, than how it was before. So then next here is what I'm using is some compression and expansion. Now in this situation, the bass was just pumping so much that I felt like the low end was eating the vocals. And if you ever need a good hint to make vocals to come more forward, focus on targeting about 150 of the instrumental, and that'll actually add this nice pocket where you're not having to make the vocals any brighter. I think a lot of times we overcompensate with the vocals to try to push the high end, and you end up getting this really frizzy, frail, and even hard to listen to type vocal. But if you can actually remove things from other places, you're setting yourself up for victory. So here's now with it off.
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escaparse, así que chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, la te tapé como una alcancía, siento que se siente prendida, la veo que estamos prendidas.
So now we're really controlling a lot of that low end. Like I'm actually hitting and compressing that thing like almost 6 dBs of gain reduction. Now, when you hear the difference before and after, I know to a lot of I, now when you hear the difference before and after, it can sound extreme, but sometimes you have to make extreme pushes to know you're gonna make things back up. And usually at the very end of my master chain, I like to add and I like to restore the low end, but in a different way. This kind of mentality where I'm forceful in some parts of the frequencies, I'm actually moving them to different parts. So I'm actually just creating a transference of energy. The next little tool over here I have is like a compressor and a tape machine, right? This is a super cool plugin by McDSP, and just listen to how this little bump right here kind of makes up for that lost low end. And then also there's this kind of warm roundedness that happens when you're using this tape machine. So here's it off.
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escapencial, así que chúpalo. Sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo. Sabe que es algo normal, la te tapé como una alcancía. Siento que se siente prendida, la veo que estamos prendidos.
And a big hint right here. Commercial mixes, there's this nice warmth and smoothness to it. It almost can sound like they're taking off the high end. And what I theorize that a lot of other mastering engineers have been doing is running things through tape like this to get that same effect. If you try to roll off the high end using a normal EQ, it can sound like that, like you just rolled off the high end. But when you use some nice warmth and saturation, that will actually make your mix and your master stand out from a lot of other guys who are just throwing through a Pro L and uploading it, right? Again, that goes back to that mindset and that frame of how can I make sure I'm staying commercially competitive? And my favorite engineers, a lot of my colleagues, they're making these nice, warm, really smooth to listen to type masters. So let me play it again and pay attention to now the warmth that it adds, especially in the high end. It really removes a lot of harshness.
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escapencial, así que chúpalo. Sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo. Sabe que es algo normal, la te tapé como una alcancía.
And then there's something about it that's even adding more focus to the master, right? So let's now go into my next, this is one of my favorite plugins. Let's open up this joint. Elysia Alpha Master. Bro, this thing is so sick, and I'm even training myself more how to use it. But basically, yeah, it looks scary. It looks a little intimidating, but don't let it fool you. What you have is a mid-side compressor. Boom. This side here, the mids. Boom. This side here, the sides. Now, what I typically do is I'll compress just the middle part of the track to kind of tuck things in, because there's usually not that much dynamics going on the left right of a mix. And then by doing that, I'll also add a little bit of gain boost to the sides. Remember, the right side over here is our sides. By adding that gain boost to the sides and also adding a little bit of downward compression in the middle, it will make the mix feel more 3D and way wider. Check this out.
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escapencial.
You ready for it?
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escapencial, así que chúpalo. Sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo. Sabe que es algo normal, la te tapé como una alcancía.
Nice. And then if I want to, I'll actually add a little bit of gain right here just to warm it up some more.
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escapencial, así que chúpalo. Sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo. Sabe que es algo normal, la te tapé como...
This thing is so crazy, and this is just the beginning. I've been playing with it a lot recently, and I love this plugin. All right, finally, like what I said earlier, I cut out a lot of low end, and I controlled it, right? This plugin, Back EQ, is fire. I used to actually have the real rack unit, and I remember the moment I started printing my mixes through it and sending it to friends and family, they're like, yo, I didn't say anything. I didn't tell them about any new gear. But I kept getting the same response. Yo, something about your masters sounds crazy. Like you were good before, but these things were nuts. There are some gears that you can buy, some tools that you can buy that will actually make you money, and this is one of them. I definitely want to put another one in my rack as soon as I can get my hands a hold of one. But basically, it's a great alternative to the SMILEY Face EQ, right? So a lot of people use like the Poltec or the Puke Child, and that's not a bad EQ in any way, shape, or form. For me, I just want to be different than most people and be a little bit more creative. And so I found that the Dangerous EQ, Plugin Alliance, This has a little bit, it's less aggressive, it's a little bit more smooth, but it adds a beautiful texture. And every time I use it, people are always saying, man, the masters are sounding great. So what I do is I do a little bit of cut to just round off the edges. I already cut a lot of the low end. Usually I do a cut down here, but this case I didn't need it. And then I do a boost on the low end at 131, and then a boost to the high frequencies. So all that low end, all that high end that I rolled off, now I'm going to kind of realign it. Check this out.
Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escapencial, así que chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, la te tapé como una alcancía.
This kind of smiley face approach towards an EQ, and the reason they call it smiley face is because you're not touching the middles, but you are boosting the highs and lows, so you're creating a smiley face. This is one of the best tools and techniques you can put into your mastering chain or your mixing to really add energy to the final stage of your mix. Secret: all car stereos and most home audio systems, they all actually have an extra smiley face EQ because the psychoacoustic effect of boosting the highs and the lows makes people feel, and like I said, we're always focused on our feelings, emotional. We're always focused on our feelings. That psychoacoustic effect makes the records feel that much more compelling. That's my digital chain. Then at this final stage here, I'll actually set it up, my print, and I will route this audio, boom, like my output 3 and 4. And what I will do is I'll route this audio going into this print bus, into this print channel. So let's actually do that right here like this, so I can show you what I mean. I'll route this to bus 1 and 2. Boom, hit it.
Algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal. Cuando la chica se...
And then as I'm routing the audio through that, it's going to be hitting my master chain over here. Okay, so that's it for all of my digital plugins, right? Then at the final stage of my mix master, I'll actually pull up my analog chain. And for right now, it's just the Better Maker Mastering Limiter. One of my mentors donated it to me a long time ago. I love this tool. I usually trade or sell my gears and stuff, but this one I know for a fact I'm committed to keeping for forever. And a big reason why I love it is because it's a hybrid analog gear. What do I mean by that? I mean that the device itself operates in true analog, but I can control it by using a plugin. And this is the dopest thing ever. The reason I love being able to do this in hybrid is because I get the same quality of analog, but anytime a client might hit me for revisions or changes or whatever it is that they need, as soon as I open up this plugin, the settings are automatically recalled to the Better Maker. So I got my iPhone set up to record this. Now, of course, it's fun to play with the knobs and everything. Pause. And but what I love about this, check this out. If I click my computer, engage, yo, how sick is that? That's so cool. So I can actually adjust the inputs and the outputs. What I usually end up using is this automatic release. I think it makes the groove really nicely. I have a pretty quick attack, and then I make my output. Now this guy actually runs really hot and it can get really loud real quickly. So I'll actually use a lower output and then make up for whatever extra gain or dBs of boost I need digitally in the box. Now, like I said, disclaimer, I wish I could show you exactly how to pass the audio through, but it would require a whole different system, a whole different setup that doesn't allow me to stream the right way. But what I will show you is what it sounds like before I use a Better Maker and what it sounds like after. So, all right, so now it's here before the analog limiting.
Chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal. Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escapencial.
Okay, so that is before it, and now here's after.
Chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal. Cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escapencial, así que chúpalo, sabe que es...
Yeah, crazy. Totally crazy, right? It just adds so much body. It has the analog warmth, so it really, there is no digital harshness going on in that 5K, and it's loud as heck, but it does not sound crushed, and that is the goal. Like, I honestly don't want it to even sound like it was technically limited. I just wanted to sound like the record was big. Now, for the final piece though, we always have to do a comparison to our reference. So here is a very OG baseline master before I even touched it. Let's give it a listen.
Chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escaparse a la chica.
And then now here is the version that actually went to DSP into Spotify.
Chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal cuando la chica se porta mal, sabe que llegó el momento de escaparse a la chica. Chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal.
Crazy. Crazy. Okay. Now you can hear a significant difference between the low end of the master and the polishedness of my master. Neither one was right nor wrong. My goal here, like I said, I'm always serving the artist. My goal here is to make sure that what gets released and what gets uploaded to DSP can be sound better or can be more competitive than what's already out with all the records. So my decision making here and controlling the low end, pulling out the dynamics, pushing the vocals more, it was all about make the record feel more aggressive and also make sure that in the context of everything that's coming out in this year that I am competitive with those records. I want to add a final note too, because I know this comes up a lot when it comes to using limiters. My limiter settings. I try not to pay attention to any particular LUFS. I found that if I'm always seeking the number, I'm actually missing the target. So I go for what sounds as loud as possible, but then isn't getting squashed. Cheat code to getting to that point is either using multiple limiters in concession with each other or using an analog limiter if you have hardware units, because those can actually run hotter and they'll meter quieter. And when I was running through, I was running at -8, but when it says the digital meter,
Chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal, ven y chúpalo, sabe que es algo normal cuando la.
I was actually getting a nice cool -12, and that gives me space to maybe even raise the volume in my final bounce. Another great technique too for getting your masters as loud but still feeling dynamic is having a nice slow attack. I'll usually do a pretty quick release or moderate release, or I will do the auto release. And sometimes I'll even use the colors down here. The even one will boost my low end quite a bit. That'll make things feel beefier. Using the odd color on the high end or in the mid range will really give that mid range boost that makes a record feel super, super loud. So that's how I master the record. It's dope. It's a banger. Go listen to it out on Spotify, Apple Music, the whole thing. Normal by Shytt and Atomic Otro way. I'm hoping this video helped you guys out, answer some questions, and gave you some new tools for your mix and your master process. Also, make sure you like, comment, and you subscribe, especially if this video gave you some more clarity, tools, and depth to your music practice. Don't hesitate to drop any questions or songs that you want me to break down for you in the future. And I'm going to end this video here playing with the mastering limiter. Yo, that's so sick! Alright, I'm Brandon Miranda, and I'm out.